I'm recording this week's episode of Irrational Fear on Gadigal land in the Eora Nation. Let's start the show.
The following program contains medium coarse language and traces of nuts. Irrational Fear recommends listening by immature audiences. Comedians, experts, laughing at the world as it burns down around us. This is a Rational Fear.
Tonight, ICAC has found the former Premier of New South Wales, Gladys Berejiklian, guilty of corruption during her time in office. As punishment, she has been ordered to serve as a highly paid executive for Optus. And Prince William has launched a new campaign to end homelessness, saying that everyone should have a safe and secure home, except for him, who should have at least 35 across 3 countries. And it's alleged that former Federal Minister Stuart Robert has set up a shell company called Synergy 360 to funnel money back to himself from the government. Critics say he should go to jail for naming the company Synergy 360. It's the 30th of June, 2023. Happy end of financial fear to all of you.
This is a Rational Fear.
Don't forget to unplug your set.
Welcome to Irrational Fear. I'm Ticketek Customer Service Manager Dan Illich, and this is the podcast that laughs in the face of the scariest news until it implodes under immense pressure. Let's meet our fearmongers for tonight. They're an award-winning producer and podcaster who knows more about Russia than Vladimir Putin. From the podcast Russia, if you're listening, it's the Tsar of Russian podcasts himself, Matthew Bevan.
Hello, Dan. Earlier this week in the newspaper, I was called a self-appointed Russia expert, which I think is a... Yeah.
Can I take a guess which newspaper?
You're going to be wrong.
Was it the Moscow Tribune, Matt? Was it the Moscow Tribune?
No, they don't listen to me in Russia. There's nothing... apparently nothing I do will get me on that Russia sanctions list. They put another edition of it this week. Another 44 people chucked on the list, still not on it. I'm starting to take it quite
devastating.
personally.
That's devastating.
Yeah.
If you were on the list, how would it change your life?
Well, I'd have to cancel that trip to St. Petersburg that I got planned. Have to stop exporting aluminium to Kaliningrad. But apart from that, it wouldn't affect me too much, I don't think.
And you may know him from his guest appearances on The Trophy Room and Backseat Drivers. It's Lewis Hobber.
Wow, did you go through my IMDb for the shortest running shows?
Oh, I actually went to your Wikipedia page. They're quite high up on your Wikipedia page.
Wow.
I'm like, I need a bit of trivia from Lewis Hobber's life. I've run out. I've run out of trivia about Lewis Hobber's life.
I would be so surprised if anyone remembers either of those shows.
I also did a guest appearance on Backseat Drivers. I can barely remember it.
Yeah. Even the Trophy Room was back when the ABC, well, I say back when, during the ABC's 20-year-long career of trying to do the Spicks and Specks of everything.
Yes, yeah. Spicks and specks of every vertical.
Yeah, of every hobby or interest anyone has ever had. And this was the Spicks and Specks of sport, hosted by
It's
Peter
amazing
Elliott.
that Whovians got up. Like that Whovian Spicks and Specks that's a very niche subject, and that got up.
Is
on
that
a broadcast
Spicks and Specks?
channel.
So is that a quiz show, or is that just
Do they ask
people talking
questions?
about? Nothing in the
think they
world
just
could
riff.
make me watch that show. Yeah.
I'm not a 75-year-old person. I don't know. I don't never watch the ABC,
Like,
so
I
wouldn't know.
rather give up my firstborn than watch Whovians.
Coming up later, we're going to be quizzing Matt Bevan all about what the fuck happened in Russia over the weekend. But first, let's have a message from this week's sponsor.
The Voice referendum is coming, and Sky News will be ready with a special 24-hour channel to cover every aspect of the No campaign. Watch Andrew Bolt say no.
Vote no.
Watch Peter Credlin say no.
No.
Watch Paul Murray say no.
No.
Watch Rowan Dean say no.
No.
Watch Pauline Hanson say no.
No.
Watch Peter Dutton say no.
No.
Watch Barnaby Joyce say something.
Now I can't but always
Will anyone watch it? Yes, but they'll already be voting no. If you don't know about saying no, watch those who have no idea say no. 24 hours a day. Sky News. Be in the know.
This week's first fear, the last refugee that has been held against their will on Nauru has been evacuated off the island, leaving behind an empty detention centre running at an annual cost of $350 million, just sitting there doing nothing. I mean, this is obviously a great kind of moment for Australian refugee policy. It kind of puts a bookend on something that's been so terrible for about nearly 12 years now.
I don't know if it's a bookend. I think it's hopeful to say bookend. It's an apocalypsis.
Well, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's not a bookend because the policy's not ending because the detention centre is still going to be on Nauru. It's just going to be open-ended. It's an open-ended bookend. It's a library that's closed to people getting books and bookends.
It's like the end of a book, and they've got to the end of the final chapter, and then they've written the end. ?
Yeah. Nauru has been watching a lot of Marvel films, and they're like, we should put in a post-credit sequence for Nauru.
Yeah, it's just going to keep continuing, but currently no one's there, and it costs $350 million. Folks, what should happen with this facility that sits on Nauru?
Resort generate some revenue for Nauru. Is all the 300? Is some of that $350 million? I was trying to figure this out today.
Yeah.
Is some of that $350 million just going to the Nauruan government, or is it all going to the private prison operator, the American company? I've been trying to figure it out because it seems like a lot of money. It is a lot of money. I'm sure some of it would go to the Nauruan government, and for a long time, this facility has been a main source of income for Nauru. Yes, well, they ran out of bird guano, which was their previous main source of revenue in Nauru. And that's not a joke. That's literally was their main source of revenue was bird crap.
Potassium mining, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Then it was the detention centre, and I think they were struggling when
No, Matt, it wasn't then the detention centre. It didn't go end of bird crap detention centre. They had some great harebrained schemes in the middle.
That's true.
They have Nauru House in Melbourne, the gigantic
there was a musical,
skyscraper.
Leonardo.
Yes.
There was a Leonardo da Vinci musical, wasn't there, that they invested in on the West
End?
End.
It was called Leonardo in Love.
That's right.
Musical.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah, Lewis, in 1993, what happened was like the banker who was looking after Nauru in Australia was like the head of Citibank in Australia, and he was like, friendly with the Nauruans, and they were running out of money, and they were trying to think of ways to invest whatever money they had left. And he back in the 70s was like a roadie to this boy band that had a one-hit wonder, and they had written like this Leonardo in Love, this love story between Leonardo da Vinci and the Mona Lisa.
Portrait of Love, Leonardo Portrait of Love or something like that. It's a dreadful title. Sorry, go on.
And so the banker was like, hey, fellas, I'm friends with the Nauruans. They've got like $7 million left. Maybe we could get them to invest in Leonardo in Love. And they took this old boy band over to the Nauru and they played the president some music. And the president was like, hey, we like these tracks. All right, we'll give you the money. So they invested $7 million on this West End production. And in 1993, they had like 100 people from Nauru, dignitaries from Nauru, leave to go to London. And then
it's like 10% of the Nauruan population.
Yeah, or the rest of the Nauruans ran out onto the runway to stop the plane from going off because they were protesting. Anyway, they landed in London and the musical flopped and no one went to the musical. And they lost the last of the Nauruan sovereign wealth fund. It's like if Peter Costello gave one of his old mates half of whatever's in the future fund just to go and
can you imagine
do a fringe show at the Edinburgh Fringe.
Australia won't even invest the excess money it has in the arts, and these people will put their last dollar on a couple of triple threats from London. God bless them.
I just looked it up, Dan, and Leonardo in Love would be a much better title than what the actual title was. Leonardo the Musical: A Portrait of Love.
No, what?
Yeah,
because Leonardo in Love, if it was 93, it would have predated Shakespeare in Love by like 5 years. So they could have eventually sued, Shakespeare in Love and made some money back.
Just put the copyright claim straight into an infrastructure fund. Sounds like a fantastic idea.
Oh my God, these poor people. This is horrific. We should just give them $350 million a year. And you know what? We should invest in their musicals. We should give them $350 million a year, and they can keep $300 million of whatever, and $50 million can go into the greatest musical ever created.
This is actually a really good idea. That's great, Lewis.
Is there some way we can use the camp for?
Well, that's see, that'll be the theatre.
Actor training or something like
Yeah.
that. Right, yeah.
Solitary can become the makeup room. The exercise yard can become the rehearsal space.
Yep.
Yeah, the galley is going to be catering,
Yeah,
obviously.
The prison guards,
yeah.
I guess, directors? I don't know. I don't know
Chorus.
much about them. Chorus, of course. Or, just techies in the background. They've already got the big lights, probably, spotlights. I see a beautiful future here.
This is a beautiful future for at least a few people who have left there. There's only 2 refugees still on the island, and that's because they're in like a legal dispute with domestic forces there. So there's been like some crime or something. So everyone else is gone, and apparently there's still 80 refugees from the offshoring process still in Port Moresby, just floating around. So in terms of refugees, I spoke to Baruz Bachani when he was in Sydney a few months ago, and he said, oh, yeah, one of the guys from Manus now lives in Port Moresby, and he's like a bare-knuckle boxer, and he like runs bare-knuckle boxing fights, and he's like the king of like organised fighting in Port Moresby. And he's like, and I'm like, well, how come that story doesn't get reported? That's a much more fascinating story than Leonardo in Love. That should be turned into a musical.
That's wild.
So PNG UFC, the musical, A Portrait of Love.
Far out.
A rational fear. It is the end of the world. You may as well laugh about it.
This week's Second Fear, according to the Independent Commission Against Corruption, Gladys Berejiklian was seriously corrupt, which is bad news for her employer Optus, because with qualifications like that, she's uniquely qualified to go for a job at PwC. Folks, is this a surprise that ICAC have found this finding, Matt?
It's a surprise that it took so long. I can barely remember. She's 2 premiers ago now. She stepped down at the height of, when we couldn't. I believe one of her last policies was announcing that people in New South Wales could have picnics of up to 5 people. It feels like a lifetime ago that we couldn't have picnics, and it's taken this long for them to investigate this relationship that, apparently they had all their text messages and stuff. I don't know what ICAC's been doing for 2 years, and that seems to be one of the biggest criticisms that both sides of New South Wales politics have had. This thing has been going since the land of no picnics. It seems like a significantly long period of time.
When people are always talking about a witch hunt, you're like, look, the good thing about a witch hunt is it's over quickly, There's not a lot of due process in a witch hunt. I think when we're looking at this, you have a choice between a 2-year waiting period or a witch hunt, and I think maybe we should bring back witch hunts.
Some of the texts that were released and reported on were pretty saucy.
Oh, they made me uncomfortable.
And like clearly Daryl Maguire is a coercive control asshole, and should never be near anybody as a human being. But not even the good ones got released. There was this line in the article that I read on the Sydney Morning Herald that said some of those messages were so deeply personal, the ICAC decided not to publish them and had never asked witnesses about them, either in public or private hearings, so as to not to cause unnecessary embarrassment. That was when my little red flag went off. I'm like, well, what? What messages didn't we see? We needed to see those ones.
I don't want to see them, Dan. I don't want to see them.
No.
I've seen Adam Levine from the Maroon 5's personal text messages, and that was horrible. I really don't want to see Gladys Berejiklian's too personal for release texts.
If we've learnt nothing from the transcripts of Prince Charles and Camilla's secret phone calls, then,
yes.
If the tampon has taught us nothing, that we must know our limits. It did make me think that if I ever get into any position of power, in the law, we don't know, it could happen. if I rise up the ranks to end up a hotshot lawyer at ICAC, one rule that I will make, in fact, across all courts, if I become Chief Justice, is that no matter what happens, we never release pet names that are used in text messages. I think that should be the one thing that everyone can take to their grave. Like, there's nothing I hate more, even people I love, in watching them use their pet name with each other. The pet names that I use with my partner, I will take it to my grave.
What are they? Come on.
Not a chance.
Come on.
Not a goddamn chance.
Matt Bevan?
You can't waterboard it out of me, Dan.
I'll share mine. We very early in our relationship started, we thought ironically and funnily and humorously calling each other Dahl, and then we just couldn't stop. And so we've been together for nearly 2 decades now, and we're still calling each other that, and we cannot stop. So anyway, our children call us that sometimes as well, just because we can't stop. So there you go. There's an exclusive for Rational Fear.
Really, thanks, Dahl. Really interesting. Really interesting response from Optus. They put out like a 1-paragraph kind of press release about this. It says, Optus acknowledges the IPAC report published in relation to Gladys Berejiklian's time serving as member of New South Wales Parliament. We refer you to Gladys's media statement and have no further comment to make. 1 paragraph. That's it. Optus saying, yeah, we read it, whatever. I think that's to have an employer say that is pretty strong. I mean, Stan Grant would kill for a response from the ABC to come in that strong to back him up.
If billion-dollar companies had to defend every member of their board, they'd be putting out press releases all day. I mean, we can all remember the incredible Mike Baird resignation from New South Wales, where he was desperate to go and spend more time with his family, and you're like, after a week or 2 weeks, whatever it was, he was straight to, working at NAB. And you're
the
like,
top job at the National Australia
Are your
Bank.
family bankers? Like, are your family on the board? Is that the only way you can see your child, Mike? The fuck is wrong with you?
Yeah. What's worse? I think his kids are Dolomites, and he went to the wrong bank. I love this idea of being seriously corrupt. I love that. Like, why couldn't you just be just corrupt,
but also
seriously corrupt?
How do you be seriously corrupt as the premier, but not that isn't enough to heat criminal charges? It's like,
yeah.
That
apparently there's not enough corruption going on to launch a criminal case.
How there's like the fire danger signs? Like, maybe seriously corrupt for a premier is actually fairly mild based on previous corruption levels in New South Wales. And it's not until you get to
what you want to be is like catastrophically corrupt.
Yeah.
I had to sign a contract today that asked if there was anything in my social media that could bring disrepute to a potential client, and I ticked no. Does that make me seriously corrupt?
Yeah, that's a lie.
I don't have a comment on that, Dan, but I think your employer might want to start drafting up a statement. Just like a generic one.
Yes. The brand has read Dan's Twitter, and we refer you to Dan's media, for we have no further comment.
Surely if you're Optus, you're like, look, Gladys Berejiklian was just doing what we've always said is our motto here at Optus. When Daryl Maguire asked her a question, she said yes.
Rational Fear.
And I'll throw money at Wagga.
You just need to know what the right things are to throw money at Wagga. And you need
I already know. You've already told me the 3 top things.
go and give them a stadium.
I'll do that too.
Just pausing the podcast here to say, Lewis, you know who isn't very ethical?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Gladys
Okay,
Berejiklian.
we were just talking about that. I wasn't sure if we were going to go into a long list of former unethical premiers of New South Wales. But no, Gladys, boom, got it, confirmed. Thanks, ICAC.
We can do Gladys because, ICAC has categorically, done the investigation. They spent, 2 years doing the investigation on Gladys, and it's clear that she's very unethical.
Unethical, extremely corrupt? Hang on, no, very corrupt?
Seriously corrupt. Like seriously 10.
Corrupt.
Seriously corrupt.
Not comically corrupt.
No, that's us. We're comically corrupt.
I think Daryl Maguire has hit the level of comically corrupt.
No, yeah, that's true. Yeah. She was seriously corrupt. He's comically corrupt. That is absolutely true. Somebody who isn't corrupt is Australian Ethical, and they are sponsoring us. They are very ethical. In fact, they've been ethically looking after money since 1986, steering the money away from things like fossil fuels, bad practices, human trafficking, and stadiums in Wagga Wagga. They definitely don't invest in stadiums in Wagga Wagga.
Do you know what, Dan? My mum, as you know, is a fan of the podcast.
Oh, yes.
And you were around at my house the other day visiting me, which was lovely. My parents were there, and my mum dropped a bombshell on both of us, which is that my mum and dad have been with Australian Ethical for years and years.
And can I say what your dad said about Australian Ethical?
Yeah, go for it.
He said they've done very well for us.
Good for them.
I really enjoyed that bit. And then that's Australian Ethical's whole thing. They take your money, they make it bigger, and they don't put that money where it shouldn't be. So big thank you to Australian Ethical for at least, spending some of that money on us, because
taking some of my parents' money and giving I've tried so hard to become independent from my parents, despite doing a job that is a joke, and now even our sponsor is finding a way to take my parents' money and give it to me I'm still 12 years old.
The only reason you have this job is you're a Nepo baby.
I never knew. I just found out.
So big thank you to Australian Ethical.
A Rational Fear is brought to you by its Patreon supporters. For as little as the price of a cup of coffee, you can get this podcast ad-free, exclusive content, discounts on live tickets, and access to the Discord chat server. Chip in at patreon.com/A-Rational-Fear. Or else.
This week's third fear, Russia. I'm sure many of our listeners have been following what's been happening in Russia, but just quickly, a dude who was in charge of a private army tried to scare Putin by taking that army to Moscow. He then stopped going to Moscow, and then he said, I'm sorry, and Putin forgave him, and now the private army guy is in exile in Minsk. Was this a true coup attempt or just a great Belarus? Matt Bevan, what the hell happened in Russia over the weekend? You were the first person I texted as soon as I saw it unfolding, and I was like, it's all kicking off, Matt. It's all kicking off.
I've spent basically every waking minute since then reading about it. And from what I can tell, I think Prigozhin is correct in saying that he wasn't trying to topple Vladimir Putin. Because there's very, very little, reporting that's coming out, and basically it seems like every single person in the FSB and CIA is just calling up journalists to tell them everything they know about this. What seems to have happened here is Prigozhin was sort of on the rise politically, but he was there on the front line, and he quite rightly wasn't a big fan of the way that the top brass of the Russian military was running the war effort, because, it has been an absolute catastrophe from start to finish. The point at which he tipped over into sort of crazy land was it seems like he wanted to solve this. He didn't like the defense minister and the chief of staff. It seems like, according to reporting in the Wall Street Journal, he wanted to kidnap them in order to...
He wanted to kidnap, the head of the military?
Yes, and the defense minister and the top general in charge of the military. They were planning a trip to sort of the war zone in the few days, in sort of this week, and his plan was to kidnap them. But he thought, I better not just kidnap the defense minister. I better have a bit of a word to a few people about this, see if they're all on my side. He called a couple of generals. They sort of seemed to sort of indicate perhaps that they might have been on his side. The CIA seems to have been of the opinion that it was a good plan, which is what was written in the Wall Street Journal today. The CIA thought that the plan was likely to work, which is surprising. But he told too many people, basically. And someone told the FSB. And instead of going, oh no, my kidnap and ransom or whatever plan has been, I've been busted, he was like, YOLO, we're going to go for it anyway. I want to kidnap this man.
So this was like a true like dead cat on the table kind of moment for him. He's like, fuck, everyone knows I'm going to kidnap these guys. I'm just going to do something crazy.
Well, no.
Get out of it.
I'm going to kidnap these guys, and they're in Moscow, and so I'm coming to Moscow.
Oh, fuck. Okay. So instead of being like, I'll just wait for them to come to me, I'll just be a cat, wait for this mouse. They're like,
yep.
We're going to buckle up, boys. We're going 200 miles.
Well, it's like 1,000 kilometres that they were trying to go. And they got closer than they should have. But I think it's possible that, due to the long-term relationship he had with Putin, maybe communications he'd had with Putin and that kind of thing, Putin didn't go, well, sorry, pal, but today's your last day. And he's organised sort of a way out for him, because Putin also not a huge fan of these guys, of the defence minister and the chief of staff. And a lot of people are sort of saying that the reason Prigozhin was, over the last few months, allowed to put out huge amounts of material on his Telegram channel about how these guys were cowards and bastards and much worse words than that in Russian. Russians have some very serious swear words. The reason that he was sort of being given free rein to do all of that on Telegram as much as he wanted is Putin kind of agreed with him and kind of wanted these guys taken down a peg anyway. But once it got to kidnapping plan, then Putin kind of thought, we might need to rein this fellow in a little bit. And in fact, the other trigger point for him sort of going from mad to crazy was Putin said, look, we're going to wind up your company. He's got this company of mercenaries. We're going to wind them up. And the deadline is the 1st of July. He decided, well, I'm going to kidnap those guys on the 25th of July. They figured it out on the 20th of July. And so he was like, saddle up, boys. We're going to Moscow.
It was an end of financial year sale. That's right. What they were doing. The boss went mad. Everything must go.
Yeah. But I mean, watching it happen, I was like, this doesn't make sense. The guy can't possibly think that he's going to get all the way to the Kremlin and kill Putin. But, I think it makes a little bit more sense with 5 days of hindsight, but, it still doesn't make a huge amount of sense.
Yeah, because the initial inciting incident that kind of was reported everywhere which was reported by Prigozhin as well, was that, the military fired upon us, so now we're angry and we're going to take our revenge. Yeah. But that kind of didn't make sense, right? That kind of there's a big question hanging over that, because it's like, I'm sure a lot of people get fired upon in war, and I don't think that's not the case.
His group have been suffering friendly fire basically for the last year and a half, and whether or not there was there is video on. I've been reading his Telegram. It's been quite an experience over the last few days.
Are you a subscriber to his Telegram? Are you a subscriber to his OnlyFans? Is this how close you are to Prigozhin?
I don't have rubles to tip into the OnlyFans account, unfortunately. But I've been watching his Telegram videos, and there is this video of the camp, and there's some trees that are blown up. It looks like something exploded, but whether it is the way that he says it is, the Russian Ministry of Defense denies it, and I kind of feel like they would be apologising for it rather than denying it if they really had done it. So I think it's more likely that he just decided his plan was rumbled. The cops knew what he was doing and they were coming, and he decided, well, I can't defect to Ukraine. I've committed too many war crimes. I can't run here. I can't run there. Let's just,
Imagine if he defected to Ukraine. He would have defected to Ukraine. He could run there. Private military contractors.
He actually, it was funny. I was reading today that when there sort of started to be talk in Russian social media circles and in a couple of media outlets about, maybe Prigozhin is gearing up for a 2024 run. Maybe he's going to succeed Putin as the president. Prigozhin.
I thought Prigozhin could run in 2024 in the US election.
Well, what he said was, I am running for president of Ukraine.
All right, wow, Jesus.
Because he said, if I'm elected president of Ukraine, there'll be no need for no more need for ammunition.
Wow.
Yeah, the guy's got a pretty
God.
hideous, weird sense of humour. He's a very unpleasant person, and I don't know what's going to happen to him now.
If he needs any work outside of the Wagner Group, like he could be cast as the evil Russian in every Hollywood film. I have never in my life seen a man who looks more like a racist depiction of an evil Russian man than that guy. Like, it's crazy. He
looks like a Peter Dutton that's been in the cupboard for too long.
When I first saw him, I was
Did you see?
I thought someone had typed in to an AI generator, evil Russian warlord. I was like, you couldn't create a better man.
Well, did you see, Lewis, the pictures of the gentleman that had been sent down to the to squat at the embassy site in Canberra?
Yes.
So this is
had
last
Russian
week.
uncle energy.
Yeah, he's so bad. He's there smoking, totally bald, puffer jacket on, track pants, and what looked like extremely expensive designer sneakers. A bit of a dad bod tummy. The most stereotypical FSB agent that I've ever seen in my entire life. Parked there.
Well, when
at
it
the,
comes to squatting,
embassy site.
Slavs are the best. They just wanted a Slav squat to do a Slav squat. That's what they did.
But yes, he would be a very good person to cast as Prigozhin's chief henchman in these upcoming Bond films, Lewis.
Interesting that the decree's been put out that Wagner will be wrapped up July 1. I saw a great video online today of it might have been a Ukraine journalist calling up the Wagner recruit hotline and kind of seeing if they're still taking recruits and kind of asking them, hey, I heard, you're going to be wrapped up. I heard that Wagner is now like an enemy of the state. Is this true? And the recruit's like, no, not true at all. Not true at all. You might as well come down, sign up. We'll get you uniform.
Well, I've been seeing
it's like they're still operating
days,
as business as usual, but it's tomorrow. Tomorrow is, July 1.
Well, since then, of course, it's been reported that Alexander Lukashenko, who is the president of Belarus, who has taken Prigozhin in, has been asking, well, maybe all the Wagner guys could come and be my personal security guards because... And so there's a lot of discussion actually at the moment about whether these Wagner guys are going to end up being sort of the private military continue to operate, but in Belarus.
Oh my gosh!
Operating at the beck and call of Lukashenko.
I would hope that they just change their name to Synergy 360, and they're like, we're all good now.
That is such a terrible name. I think Wagner's a better name than Synergy 360. Hey, what's the deal with PMCs in Russia? Like, how many are there? Like, it seems, and like
by PMC,
when we talk about
you mean private military contractor?
Private military contractor, yeah. When we talk about politics in Australia, we talk about a lot of factions in government. Like, how many factions are there in Russian government, and do they have their own PMCs for each of them?
Well, from what I can tell, there is an increasingly large number of PMCs. Wagner wasn't. Wagner was kind of an interesting case in that it was a PMC that was kind of an arm of the Russian military to a certain extent. They used Russian military helicopters to get around. They were armed by the Russian military. They did all these things with the Russian military, and they were
did
enacting
friendly fire like the Russian military.
That's right. They were enacting Russian foreign policy in Africa and in the Middle East and that kind of thing. But increasingly what seems to be happening is large Russian corporations are setting up private military companies. And why they're doing that, I don't think they're doing that so that potentially they want to send some security guards to their oil wells wherever they are around the world, or their gas fields. But some of the speculation is that they're so worried about the potential collapse of Russian society that they're just kind of like, we would rather have some guys around that work for us and aren't the FSB and aren't the Russian police. So if everything falls apart, we can just continue to be a gas company. Thank you very much for whoever it is that comes next. And we want to still be here, making our billions of dollars in these jobs. And I don't know that we can necessarily trust the FSB to look after us. So maybe if I hire some goons and sort of station them around my headquarters, then that might make me a little bit safer. That seems to be what's happening, because there are a number of, like Gazprom, which is the world's biggest gas producer, created their PMC in January, so there used to be, and PMCs are illegal in Russia, to be clear, but I mean, whatever, but there is an increasingly large number of them apparently popping up around Russia as people become more worried about the future of Russian society.
I kind of hope this catches on. Like I would love it if every company, once they go to start talking about their IPO or whatever, they also start talking about their PMC. It's like, we've got to get on the stock market. And then you've just suddenly, McDonald's have got their army, Hungry Jacks have got their army, whatever, Johnson & Johnson have got their army. And then
Clive Palmer has his army.
Of course.
Yep.
Yeah. Titanic 2 has its own army, toiling away in third class. Because everyone always wonders, you get these Fairfax Channel 9 scaremongering about the Chinese invasion. It's like, you've got to be ready for the Samsung invasion. You got to be prepared for it.
The Dell versus Samsung fights of the future. Yeah.
What are people like? Is it Samsung or Apple? You're like, well, let's find it out on the battlefield.
Put them each at one end of Afghanistan and just see what happens. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, the graveyard.
It was really astounding to watch on Twitter on the weekend, just seeing that news roll through. And there were a lot of people complaining online about, why isn't the ABC doing rolling coverage of this? Why isn't the ABC doing this? But I checked DW and Al Jazeera, and they didn't do it either. DW was doing an hour-long show on beer, and Al Jazeera was talking about Palestine or something. And it's the news was happening as Twitter was tweeting. It seemed untenable that the ABC could even do rolling coverage of something that no one could verify that.
Well, the reason I was called as a self-appointed Russia expert is people were wondering why I wasn't there doing coverage. There's no way that I was in a position to know nearly enough about what was going on to comment about it on the television at that point. I mean, it's one of those things that it's not as though you can send cameramen. I think the world of 24-hour news as we know it was sort of built around, I mean, I hate to say this, but it was built around terrorist attacks. It was built around terrible siege of this place, the Martin Place siege or something, in other parts of the world. You send a camera down and that camera just points at a building for the next 24 hours. And if anything happens, then you can keep an eye on it. But when things are happening, in places that there were no journalists, I mean, there weren't a bunch of journalists staked out in Rostov-on-Don waiting for a coup attempt, it's just really difficult to verify anything that's coming in off Telegram and off Twitter and that kind of thing.
And Russia's not particularly famed for their journalism, are they? They're not famed for having an open press, are they?
No, but they are famed for having cameras literally everywhere. They are the dash cam country. They are so there will be a lot of video around, but it takes a while to verify it. It takes a while to figure out. We saw in the early days of the Ukraine war, there was so much misinformation about what was going on. Videos from Microsoft Flight Simulator were being put up as, real footage of planes being shot down and that kind of thing. It is such a fog of war around these things, despite the fact that there is more pictures than ever before. So it's really hard to cover. But what I do want to say is throughout this week, I have been, digging really deep into this story. And who had it? Weeks before it happened, Indian 24-hour news media.
No way.
Really?
I have no idea why. I don't know why, but I quite enjoy watching. India has a number of 24-hour English language news channels that are. Imagine everything you love or hate about English language. Western 24-hour news channels dialed up to 11. They are more biased. They are more, hyperventilating. They have bigger panels. They shout more. Everything. I love Indian 24-hour television. It's incredible.
I've seen a few clips. I've seen a few clips of when China kind of crossed the border and India and China were hitting each other with batons, and the graphics on the screen. It was like watching MMA or something. It was. it was so bright and shiny and flashy. It was really attention grabbing.
And they'll have a panel of 16 people all shouting each other, and like they'll be like, you know, someone will be in the bottom corner window, and it'll be like their chyron at the bottom will be China perspective, and it's just like a Chinese person, a person with Chinese heritage, and that person is there to be screamed at by the entire rest of the panel, and you know it's incredible stuff. But the point is, quite offensive and occasionally racist as they are, they put out a lot of content, and like 3 or 4 weeks ago, in late May, they're there going, is this guy's Prigozhin about to lead an armed insurrection against, you know, Vladimir Putin? And they did a 5-10 minute several channels in India are doing 5-10 minute segments on speculating about whether or not Prigozhin is about to do this. And it could just be a, you know, stop clock, write twice a day kind of thing, but they kind of had it weeks ahead of schedule, and nobody else did. It was quite wild, and good on them.
And you couldn't move forward your release of the next season of Russia, if you're listening, to make it in time for this news. That is terrible. It's terrible.
Look, we did have the group chat was popping off a little bit over the weekend about, because we're launching. This is another Rational Fear exclusive, but we're launching more episodes in like 3 weeks' time, 3 or 4 weeks' time. And we were like, can we just start now? And basically, you know, when Prigozhin got let off the hook and sent into Belarus, so did we, except for the Belarus part. And so we're like, you know what, we're going to just do the best possible episode about this in 4 weeks' time. And people were like, oh, that's right, that Prigozhin guy. What's he up to? Oh, what's the guy there? So that's our plan.
Well, who knows what he'll be up to by then.
Thanks for keeping us up to date. I'll consider this the Russia, if you're listening, emergency pod then.
For sure.
That is it for the show. Just a quick update before you go. We have got a couple of live shows coming down the line, which is very exciting. September 9, we're going to be performing at the Women in Media Conference 2023. This is the first
and you
time
can
Lewis
see
is hearing
why.
of it.
Yeah. I know we're doing it, and I know everyone knows it doesn't make sense. So I can't I can't wait to find out how and why this is happening.
Well, we are going to be joined by some great people on the panel, including Hannah Ferguson from Cheek Media. She's been on the show before. Nayuka Gori, she's excellent, from Black Comedy. Nina Oyama, who, of course, is an Irrational Fear friend of the show, also friend of the show. Vijay Rajan is back doing ads for us as well. So it's going to be a really fun show. So if you're in Sydney, that's the Women in Media Conference, September 9. And potentially the weekend of the 15th, 16th or 17th, we're going to be performing at Torres Strait, in the Torres Strait at Thursday Island. So that's that could be good. So there'll be more information on that one as we figure out those details. So if you're FNQ and you want to see us live, please hop a ticket to TI for that weekend. That's going to be pretty fun. That is it for Irrational Fear. Big thanks to our guest, Matt Bevan, and Lewis Hobber. You guys got anything to plug?
I think I just did. New season of If You're Listening, 3 or 4 weeks' time.
Excellent. That was a good sizzle. Lewis, have you got anything to plug yet?
Next week, Dan. Next week. Bear with me.
Next week. Please join us on the Patreon, particularly if you've noticed there's a lot more ads on the show lately. That's because we've turned ads on. So if you want an ad-free version of the show, hit us up on Patreon and you get an ad-free and sponsor-free version of the show. Big thank you to Australian Ethical for sponsoring the show, all of our Patreon supporters, Jacob Round of the Teppanyaki Timeline. Until next time, there's always something to be scared of. Good night.